All right, it says it's recording. I'm Dick Reinerson, psychologist and a member of the oral history interview program. And today we will be talking with Dr. Daniel Sanders, a past president of OPA. Dr. Sanders, if you might, could you tell us a bit about your background and also something about why you chose to become a psychologist?
Sure. Thanks, Dick, and I appreciate the State Association taking an interest in what I've done. I served as president of OPA from '96 to '97, and I believe at that time I was the first African American president of OPA. That was a very interesting time in a lot of ways. I think that the organization wasn't sure what to expect, and then on top of all of that, our executive director at that time, once she saw that I was in place, elected to resign. And so in my tenure, my job was to hire a new executive director, which is Michael Ranney, who has been a real asset to the association. He brought us out of the mom and pop organization into, I think, one of the premier state associations in the American Psychological Association. So
I was on the board at that time, and I remember that as a very difficult time with that transition. And there had the executive director had not been there very long to begin with, so you had a difficult task.
But I had good support. The board around me really pulled together, and as I said, Michael's done an excellent job in terms of moving the association forward. So I was very happy with the association by the time I was moved into past president and then on off the board. In terms of beginnings, sticking with the association, actually Fred Freeze was very instrumental in getting me involved with the association. We met by happenstance, and he at that time said, "Have you been to our state association?" I said, "No, I haven't, Fred." And so he picked me up, and we spent a number of months, years driving together back and forth from Northeast Ohio down to Columbus, having very good talks. And in many ways, Fred served as a mentor for me as a young psychologist, and have maintained a really good friendship over the years. I don't see him as often because Fred's kind of blown up and is more on the national scene, but still remains a good friend. I feel that that the State Association had continued to face different challenges around that time. The whole issue of prescription privileges came onto the scene, and that was being questioned. How should we proceed? And just some. I think the whole profession of psychology has gone through quite a revolutionary change over the years. It's hard to believe that, but I think at the time that I started into the field, we were still pretty much a young profession, moving toward maturity, as it will. And there weren't that many other mental health professions on the scene. But then since that time, we've seen counseling licensure come into play, marriage and family licensure, those kinds of things. So it's been a challenge to what our role is as psychologists, including the revolution within the insurance industry and how it has affected our association with different iterations of insurance. And even now with the Affordable Health Care Act coming into play, it's yet to be seen what the role of psychology will play in the field of healthcare in the years to come. And I guess that's a good thing, to realize that you're still part of an evolving organization. I was talking to one of my former students the other day, and we still agreed that psychology is a very enriching field. we are able to, I think, impact so much of the culture in which we live. Of course, there's clinical psychology, but when you think about what we can do in terms of professional organizations, in terms of industrial psychology, those fields, psychology, I believe, at least its tenets, is woven into the fabric of our culture.
Well, Dr. Sanders, what motivated you to become a psychologist?
Strangely enough,
It's been a long history of all kinds of controversies and stressful situations. And so.
My background included a few years with an organization called Up With People. It was a musical group that toured nationally and internationally. And it was a very positive, hopeful organization looking at issues such as how we treat one another, moral issues, those kinds of things, all set to music. We were high school students staying in the homes of families, both in the United States. I toured in the United States, East, West, Canada, Europe as well, staying in people's homes. And so that approach, instead of staying in hotels like a lot of musical groups did, gave me, in a sense, a very personal view of not just American culture, but international culture. And you realize how families adjust to different situations. And so being a part of human development unwittingly became a part of who I am as a person. So when I finished high school and looked at going to college, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to major in. So in my undergrad years, I had to take an intro to psychology class, which again piqued my interest further in human behavior. And I had an opportunity to actually sit down and kind of do a mock counseling session with someone. And when I did that, I knew I had found what I felt was my calling in life. With Up With People, we looked at trying to change the world, in a sense, on a large scale. What I saw psychology doing for me was giving me the continued opportunity to change the world, but one person at a time. So the ability to see someone's life go from what might be a very negative situation to a very positive one is still very enriching, very satisfying for me. It's great to have a field that you can get paid at doing what you do if you didn't get paid at all for it.
Well, that's a rather unique way of gaining entrance into psychology. I'm not sure I know any other musicians who've come that way.
Yeah. And I guess in some ways it is like music, in terms of you really have to respond to the client. Sure, you may have a script going in, but with that person you start to realize that you have to respond to the need of the client. So again, it remains a very satisfying field for me. Also, from doing clinical work, I then became a professor at Kent State University, where I was able to, again, work with students and help them to matriculate into the profession of psychology. A very rewarding area as well. I did that for a number of years. Unfortunately, Kent State kind of went on to hard times. That the economy had slowed that university life down, so I had to look at providing for my family. And around that same time period, actually through OPA and my talks with colleagues, I got introduced to a number of people who work within the field of corrections. And in one of our discussions, it was brought to my attention, if you really want to see a challenge to your skills and do some good within the area of African American males, then you should take a serious look at corrections. So I did, and began working with the Adult Parole Authority, with inmates who are being released from prison back into the community. So again, assisting them in adjusting from prison life to community life again, working with their families, helping agencies to do what they needed to do, became very rewarding for me. And it's from corrections that I did retire. I did transition from adult parole authority to our Supermax prison outside of Youngstown, Ohio, where I was director of that psychology program there at the Ohio State Penitentiary. And again, there was never a dull day in the prison. There was always something. And working with what you might call the more hardened aspects of our society, and yet still being able to affect change in those lives, even in the men who at that prison were on death row, provided a great challenge for me. So the clinical work, the university work, the prison work. Also, I spent some time working with the mental health board in Summit County in terms of evaluating the agencies that they funded, working at Falls View State Hospital as their program evaluator as well. All those roles I've been able to occupy as a psychologist. So I see my profession as being very broad and able to use my skills in just a number of different settings.
You've had a diverse range of experiences, somewhat greater, I think, than most psychologists, beginning with the music.
Yeah, yes. It's, again, I feel like I've been very fortunate to be in this field and to do the work that I do. Again, to be paid for doing something you would just do anyway if you were given the opportunity, I think is a rare opportunity for most people to do that. So, part of my role with OPA was to serve at the national level, with the American Psychological Association, I was able to work with other state associations in terms of how they were moving their organization forward. That was a good experience for me to do that. I thought about moving forward with perhaps some form of national office, but that wasn't to be. It was good to do the traveling, to speak at other state conventions, so on and so forth. Yeah, I guess I didn't move forward on that.
This may be an unfair question, but dealing with psychology nationally, other state associations, any comparisons that you've made between our association in Ohio and some of the other associations that you visited?
I think that the issue that was coming forward at that time was we were trying to really put forward a diversity initiative within those various states, and what we proposed to them is look at the population that you serve. When I was in Wyoming, we're looking at the Native American population, and asking them, does your organization in any way look like the population that you're serving? If not, then efforts need to be made to move that forward. And so looking at the pipeline, students who are at the undergraduate level and then on to graduate level, so that starting from the beginning, you are having students of diversity entering into the field of psychology who would then go on to graduate school and become professionals. So that was the focus then, and I think it made sense to most of the state associations that they needed to become more of a mirror of the client population that they were serving, and they were responsive to that. So, not that you would want the Wyoming or the Georgia association to look like Ohio, but you would want them to look like the state in which they were operating. So it was different. Again, not looking for them to model exactly after us, but to just simply meet the needs that were there. And I thought that was very important.
I've had the sense that during that period and before, our association put more emphasis on diversity. And in fact, I think we took some risks in several areas
Yes.
with our focus on and emphasis on diversity. And we always did see ourselves as a leader, and certainly you were one of the leaders in that movement, and had to deal with both the positives and the repercussions from time to time.
When I first became involved with the State Leadership Association, which is the national APA organization, at our conferences, it was pretty much an all-male white room. And over the years that I served, I saw that transition of more women, more minorities, more people of color. And so I guess I didn't think about it at the time, but it was very satisfying, again, as I was moving off of that organization, to realize that change had happened there. As I think, as is so even on a national scene, the realization that our country has changed in its makeup, and that our leadership, our organizations need to reflect that if it's going to be responsive to the needs of our country. So, wow, I guess I realized that more than just as an organization, how we as a culture have changed over the years, now being in my 60s, you know. So.
And I think as an organization we continue to struggle to bring minorities into the organization, and to make sure that they have adequate representation. Much of all that struggle began back during your presidency to bring more people in.
Yes. One of the things I'm currently doing, although I'm not as active in the State Association, my membership remains strong, and whatever the association would ask of me, I'll be glad to support and be involved in that. But I've gotten a little more involved locally with the Cleveland, Ohio chapter of the Association of Black Psychology. And just trying to bring what skills I have into that association to see that they continue to thrive and do well. And we were able to actually bring the national convention of the Association of Black Psychology to Cleveland in the first year of our existence, which was quite something. And we had a pretty good convention up in the Cleveland area at that time. So it's the Cleveland area, including Akron, Canton, and those areas as well. So that's part of what I'm pretty active in doing currently. So I think that, and I hope that my colleagues, other past presidents of the association, are taking time to plug themselves into some of the local organizations that might, and it may not even be a psychology group, but I think we do have a responsibility with the skills that we've given, received, with the roles that we've played, to help mentor other younger psychologists or younger professionals who are looking to make a difference in society. That we need to continue to do that, to be active in mentoring the younger professionals. In my practice here, not all of us are psychologists. So, and that was interesting, to work with I have licensed social workers, licensed counselors here at the practice, and to, again, mentor them so they can become the therapists, the change agents that they need to be in the work that they do. Again, it's very satisfying for me to provide direct service, yes, but to help others who are providing direct service to do a good job.
Still the professor.
Yeah, I guess so. And that's funny, because when I thought about leaving university life, I said, I like teaching, you know. So how am I going to do that if I'm not at a university? And yet, those opportunities still come my way. I'm very active in my church. So I've done couples workshops, couples retreats, you know. My wife and I work together to do weekends with couples, helping teachers in terms of how they work with difficult students, providing, you know, workshops for them as well. So yeah, I still do teaching. It's just in a different venue, than I used to.
Yeah. Therapy is teaching.
Yeah, it is.
Mm.
Very, very much so.
Well, you began by talking about music. Do you do anything with music at this point?
No, I don't. I am a jazz buff. I go to jazz festivals. I listen to music, continuously, but I don't do any singing or anything like that these days. There are much more talented people on the scene than me. I might sing in the shower, but that's about as far as it goes. And, you find with time that a lot of things are good to do, but you really do have to focus on things that are most expedient, that where you can be most effective. And so the work I do here, the roles I do with mentoring in different venues, they take up a lot of my time. And I'm also a grandparent, so traveling to see my grandchildren is key for me. My wife and I also travel. We're planning a European 2-week trip this coming summer. Over the years, we've been to China, Panama, Africa, Australia. That's a keen hobby that I like to continue to be involved in. That came from my Up With People days, because I saw a lot of different places then, and that bug has stayed with me, to see how other people live. And I remember at that young age when I first stepped outside of the United States and realized how different cultures are, but yet positive in their own way. And so having that world view of more than just Northeast Ohio has been very important for me, and in the work that I do. It gives you a sense of tolerance that I think a lot of people don't have.
I've known you since the 90s.
Uh-huh.
I was on the board and you were on the board and president. And you always have had a great deal of energy. It does not sound like you're slowing down.
I hope not. Even as, I'm so-called retired, I call myself semi-retired. Again, it's retired to do even more things as opposed to doing less things. And that's what I like to do. Continue to stay active, continue to stay involved, continue to learn new things. That's another thing that I hadn't quite conceived of when I got into this field, is that as well as teaching my clients have taught me a lot over the years. You do experience life through your clients' lives. And I can't begin to tell you how often a client has come in and sat down on my sofa and started sharing things about their lives, realizing that in many ways my life experience may have paralleled theirs to some degree, which creates that empathy that all psychologists should have, but even more so helping me to understand and re-examine times of my life and mature even further from the experience that I've had, and then turn that right around and take my experience and have the client benefit from that as well. So there's an exchange that takes place that I think is very important in our growth as professionals, that we learn from our clients as well as the clients learn from us. So that's been a great experience.
Do you teach that to the young therapists that you work with?
I guess I do. One of the things that one of my professors taught me early on is that when your client seems to be pushing you away, that's when you need to lean in. And when your client seems to be sucking you in, that's the time to pull back. In a sense, it's counterintuitive, but you'll learn more about yourself and about your client when you exercise that. Of course, we use that term countertransference, and sometimes we look at it as a bad term, But actually, I think if you acknowledge that that does happen and can examine yourself in the midst of it, you do learn a lot about yourself and about your client. Because what the client does with you, they do with other people. So if you can trust what you're experiencing from your client, you can get an insight into how your client is experienced by other people in the community, and thereby able to teach that. So yeah, it's quite an exciting experience, the work of therapy that we do.
Your enthusiasm seems as strong as ever.
Thanks, Dick. Again, I just hope so. People have asked me, well, when will you stop doing this? I says, well, I guess when I can't remember my clients' names anymore, I guess I'll have to hang up my shingle. But what you find is that even your client base tends to shift with you. I see a lot more older clients than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they talk to me about the aches and pains they go through, I says, yeah, I know what you mean about arthritic issues, about health challenges that you face, because that's my experience as well.
We gain more credibility as we get older.
Yes, we do.
And the white beard sometimes helps.
It does. It does.
Well, you've seen tremendous changes in really all aspects of psychology, and certainly in the practice area. We've evolved from primarily psychodynamic to basically more a cognitive behavioral approach, mm-hmm. and other orientations. And as you look back on all these changes, I'm wondering what do you see as the future? What might we look like as a profession? What might we be doing as clinicians 10 years from now or at some other point in the future?
I think there's always going to be a need for what we do. Even more so now, in this age of social media. And I know as a profession we need to continue to adapt to that. I know I've done that. The issue of video conferencing with clients who are out of town, that sort of thing. But there remains that need for human touch, if you will. But we live in a society that doesn't foster that as much because of the transitioning that goes on, the movement of our current generation, relocating from here to there. When I was growing up, and all of my relatives worked in the same factory, and mm-hmm. all my cousins lived within a 5-mile radius of me, and so you had family and friends right there that you grew up with. Now, once my kids finished high school, they've not come back to Northeast Ohio. One's in Florida, one's in Chicago, and who knows where they'll be 3 or 4 years from now. Mm-hmm. So the need for that continued human touch is important. I have a client that I saw for a year or so who moved to Philadelphia, and still we stay in contact by telephone until she is able to reestablish connections there. So what we provide in terms of that human connection, I think, remains very, very valuable to our society. And so people will find a way to get our services one way or another. So I don't see us dying out as a profession. I see us transitioning through the use of technology. But I think what we do is important. As a profession, there are several other professions that do similar things to what we do. And that might be the challenge, whether psychology can maintain a kind of uniqueness about it as compared to other professions, I don't know. The notion of psychologists providing prescriptive privileges, that still is in play, whether or not that's going to be an integral part of our role or not. I think it should be. I think that the young psychologist needs to continue to diversify their role. So the involvement of social media, the prescription privilege issue, the other competing professions, all become a part of what we need to look at as a profession.
And it seems that there's a pressure on us to spend less time with the individual we're treating. That pressure comes from insurance companies, when you're in large organizations, see people for half an hour, see so many people in a day, and so the issues you're addressing and the relationship issues remain crucial and seem somewhat threatened.
I understand that to be the case. I still think that people need to have that human contact, and we'll find a way to make that happen. Yes, it may happen within a 30-minute session versus a 50-minute session. Okay, it may happen more so in a group setting than an individual setting. But still, the idea that I can close the door with someone and share what's going on in my life, knowing that I will not be judged, knowing that this person is there to help me be the best person that I can be, I think is a need that remains. And people will seek out those kinds of services within the healthcare system or outside of it. The need for that kind of service remains. We as a profession are unique because some people say, well, I can do it within my church. And that's great, and they should. But not everyone has that kind of connection, or feels that to seek those kind of services within a religious organization would go without some form of judgment. And so therefore they won't open up. Here, I believe the client feels they can open up totally about their lifestyle and feel that the therapist will work in terms of what is in their best interest, as opposed to operating from a system that would be judgmental or those kinds of things.
Well, we've covered a lot. And you had a truly fascinating career, and it seems as if you'll have a number of years yet in your career. Any parting comments, observations, wisdom for the association and psychology before we finish the interview?
Well, I think that what I said earlier about taking a hard look at the clients, at the population that we serve, remains job one, if you will. If we lose touch with the people that we serve, then we become obsolete. So looking at the needs of the population that we serve, looking at the issues that they are facing, the challenges that are there for them, if we're responding to that, then we're doing the job that we need to do. We also need to advocate on behalf of them. We cannot presume that corporations, government, etc. are going to always operate with the best intentions for the population that we serve. So continuing to be politically involved, I think, is important, so that the funds needed to provide the services for our clients remain available. Continuing to see that the universities and schools that provide the education for our profession are still in play and providing quality educational services for our potential professionals that are coming into the scene. That remains important. As a particular state association, a lot of what happens within our country happens within each individual state. So as well as keeping an eye on the national scene, we must keep an eye on what's happening right here in Ohio. Because Ohio can be very different than North Carolina, than Arizona, than California. And so we have to pay attention to what happens within our state.
It's always a struggle to get psychologists involved in the state association and involved in politics and influencing policies. Any thoughts on what we need to do additionally to bring young psychologists into the system and have them become more active as advocates for the needs of our patients and others?
In my role as a professional, I have endeavored to work outside of my office, to be involved in various community initiatives, those kinds of things. With the shootings at Sandy Hook, the local school system asked me to be involved in helping them to deal with security and issues within their student population. I was more than willing to do that. So I think that helps to promote our profession, because we do bring that unique perspective to our schools, to our churches, to our community organizations. And when they see us doing that, then I think that people say, I'd like to do what he does. I think that what he does is valuable. And so if my child says they want to major in psychology, I know a psychologist. He works with me on the board or whatever, and that's a very noble profession, and I'd be very glad to pay for my son, my daughter's education to pursue that field. So we need to continue to be involved and have a presence within the communities in which we live and work, outside of just our strictly professional roles. So if you are locking yourself into just your 40-hour-a-week job, then you're making a serious mistake. You have to go beyond that, reach outside of that, and get to be known within your community. That's not just good for your practice, but it's good for your association to see that happen. As a professor at Kent State, I always made sure that board members came and spoke to my classes to explain them the role of the state association with regards to protecting their profession. And even if my students were going to go back to Pennsylvania or Indiana after they graduated, I encouraged them to get involved with that state association, to realize that your license as a psychologist is not protected, that it can change within the blink of an eye, and what you do as a psychologist can be changed within your state. So to protect your license, to protect your profession, you need to be involved in that. So that was a message I gave to my students when I was a professor at Kent State, and I would hope that other professors would be doing the same thing.
As always, I'm impressed with your energy and your passion for what you've done, and your hopefulness for the future. If you have a final word for us, please, and then we will finish.
I want to thank the association for feeling that, believing that I would have something to contribute. I don't take that for granted. My involvement with OPA was a key part of my professional development. Fred may have gotten me to the meetings, but once I got there, my affiliation with you and others really helped mature me as a psychologist. So I'm in great debt to OPA for the opportunities they afforded me and for the growth they've given me over the years. And like I said, I'm always willing to do what I can to help them. But they have a very talented group of people, both at central office and also within the board itself in what they do. So I'm very proud of OPA and the work that they've done over the years, and would say that no matter where I am, and wish them well.
And OPA was very fortunate, is very fortunate to have you part of the organization.
Thanks, Dick.
I want to thank you for taking your time and going through the interview for the Oral History Project. And we wish you many more years of good health and practice.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay.